Good afternoon. Welcome to your Innovation Technology General Services Committee. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Bonin, I've been informed, is still in a prior committee where they've got a contentious issue that's taking a little bit longer, so he will join us when he gets here. So let's just jump right into it. Mr. Villanueva, are there general public comment cards?
Yes, sir, we have one.
We have one? Okay. Great. Well, so we have a general public comment card. Why don't we handle that right now? And if I could ask Antonio Ramirez to come forward for a general public comment.
One moment, please. Good evening. We have a gang epidemic here in the city of Los Angeles. And I don't know where the deficit or the flaw is coming from. The city is not in any way helping the situation by not clamping down on these dirty cops primarily at West Los Angeles PD. They're not enforcing the rule of law. So what we're asking is start honoring your taxpayers and your citizens and start arresting and sanctioning and firing these dirty rogue cops who are giving preferential treatment to these gangbangers, felons, and junkies. And again, law-abiding citizens are being crucified left and right for standing up and believing in the rule of law. And again, we have crimes. We have crimes that are committed by these domestic terrorists, which include criminal stalking, gang banging, gang stalking, ID theft, vandalism, graffiti, grand theft, invasion of robber, invasion of privacy, libel, slander, false imprisonment, crimes against humanity, crimes against our property, mental anguish and torment, breaking and entering, criminal trespass, cyber attacks, conspiracy to deprive our fundamental rights, fear and intimidation, welfare fraud, child abuse, drugs, weapons, piracy, domestic terrorism, public safety violations, home invasion robbery, contraband, and several others, including unsafe premises and graffiti, and creating a toxic and uninhabitable premises all over. People all over Los Angeles live in fear. And you need to know that maybe most of you are comfortable. People like me are in the front lines chasing out the gangbangers and going after these dirty cops. That's why I bust my butt to come here every single day so I can expose these malfeasant individuals. We've got to clamp down on these gangbangers. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the comments. I must stress, though, that we're trying to keep the comments in this committee limited to the issues that are before this committee. This is the Innovation, Technology, and General Services Committee. So I think I'm going to recommend that items 5 through 10 be approved on consent, but we're going to do that at the end of the meeting. There's public comment cards on each of those items, so we'll put that off until the end. Item 3, we're going to continue without objection. Okay, and that brings us to item 1. Mr. Villanueva, if you would please read item 1.
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is a verbal report from the General Manager of the General Services Department relative to the top 10 department priorities.
And are there any cards on this item?
None, sir.
Okay, great. Tony, I'd like to invite you to the table to share with the committee the important projects initiatives that General Services Department's been working on. Starting with this meeting, we're going to ask you to come on a regular basis to talk about the top 10. We really appreciate your willingness to do that and to work with us and to approach it in this way. We've done it a little bit with the IT committee and found it to be effective, and we welcome the list, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. We'll be happy to report on a periodic basis of what's our 10 projects, Department of General Services. I will go through them briefly and give you a general overview of what's going on with the projects, and at the end, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. One of the projects that we are involved in is the upgrade of the vehicle management system which is being used by GSD, LAPD, and also the Los Angeles Fire Department. The upgrade was approved in the 2013-14 budget for about $3.1 million, and we will report back to you April 14th with 2014 with an implementation plan. Another project that we're working on is a replacement of our SMS, which is our supply management system. And this system procure supplies or commodities for the entire city, about $500 million a year. And we're working with ITA and the controller to replace this system. Another program that we're involved in is the QECB Energy Conservation Projects. We have are slated to complete 13 QECB projects this year. We've already completed 28 projects, which will come to a total at the end of this fiscal year. And we're projecting to save about 3 million kilowatts in power annually based on the different changes and improvements that we've implemented at these 41 locations. And some of the things that we are replacing with more energy efficient equipment is roofs, chillers, lights, cooling towers, and control automation. One of our major projects that we completed is the Central Library. We've had two major visits. About 6 months ago, Senator Barbara Boxer requested a private tour to look at the Central Library. We replaced 3 chillers, replaced the roof, and we also refurbished the cooling towers. The cooling towers refurbishment will save us about 800,000 gallons of water a year, and we're looking about reducing our power there, energy there, by 1.3 million kilowatts a year by implementing those programs. And also, a couple weeks ago, we had the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy also visit that project to do a tour, and also that particular projects and all the number of energy conservation projects that we've done. The LA Better Business Challenge, which is sponsored by the Department of Energy, presented General Services with an award for the million square feet that we have committed to the 20 million or 30 million square feet that the City of LA has committed for the LA Better Building Challenge. And also as it relates to water conservation, since 2011, we have been involved in retrofitting close to 450 of our facilities as it relates to water conservation, and we're anticipating that these retrofits will save us about 52 million gallons of water a year. And also we have another probably a couple of hundred facilities that we need to complete, and we're working with DWP to identify additional funding. We have a project with them where they've, I think, in the process of approving about $300,000 so we can do additional retrofitting, and we think with another 700 we can complete the entire city. Another energy conservation related project is financing of energy conservation projects. One challenge we were dealing with when the federal government money runs out, when the our months runs out, where do we go from here? So what we did, we worked with the council and also with DWP to take a $10 million program that we had that we could finance projects for only 10 years to extend that to 20 years where we could go out and implement more robust energy conservation, like with chillers, with roofs, and with cooling towers, because initially this program was only for lighting. Lighting is, you can do pretty easy, but your biggest bang for your buck is with the chillers, with the heating and air conditioning. So that was done, and we're able to work with WP, and they're anticipating maybe we might get about a 17% reduction in the interest rate that we've had. Since 2000, we've been doing energy conservation, and I think we've borrowed close to about $9 million with WP, but we've paid all the money back. The next project is visitors parking. We processed about 160,000 requests for visitors parking, and what we're looking to do, be completed by this year, is to automate that visitors parking. And a lot of the council's offices are impacted by that. The system will allow authorized users to request permits via the internet, and they'll automatically transfer the information to the correspondence gate, so when they get there, they can print the permit, visitor permit, and just hand it to the visitors as they come in. It was reduced time and a lot of waiting time for visitors that come to City Hall or come to City Hall East. Our next project that we are working on is what we call reverse auctions. We've started reverse auctions back in 2011. This is a similar as eBay, but it's different. Instead of bidding higher on commodities that we bid out, it's bring the price lower. Based on what we've done since 2011, we've saved the city close to about $14.8 million in the reverse auction. Recently, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, we went out to bid for a copier bid, and based on the reverse auction, we were able to save the city close to about $9 million based on the reverse auction. Also, as it relates to parking lot automation, this year we will be automating P1 commercial parking lots where we will implement pay stations, and also in Lot 2 we will provide the opportunity for customers to use credit cards when they have an opportunity to pay when they go to Lot 2. Our next project, which is the fuel site emergency generators, the Fuel Management Task Force has identified 12 sites that we need to provide or install emergency generators in case the power goes out, in case there a major disaster. Most of the fuel sites, I think all of the fuel sites for LAPD and fire department have emergency generators, but we want to make sure we have them in strategic locations where everyone in the city, street services, Bureau of Sanitation, and everyone has accessibility to fuel if there is a disaster or a major emergency. Also, our standards division is involved in a $27.8 million project of repaving Wilshire Boulevard. And the final project that we're involved in, our GSD construction forces, is working with the mayor's office and BOE to erect a new replacement communication tower at Verdugo Peak, share communication site with the city of Glendale.
A lot of good things, and you went through a whole lot of great projects, and
Thank you.
I'm very excited with the work that you're doing on all of these fronts. A couple of questions. You talk about the reverse auction,
Yes.
which is a great concept. It's it's us doing more with less, and getting out that last dollar, and I love that. I just wonder, are there certain scenarios where that's not a good fit for some
Yes,
of the
you have certain commodities that not fit into that because of the magnitude and the number of items you have to deal with. And if you did that, sometimes it might take you weeks to do it. So we select the ones that I think that the city can get the biggest bang for its buck and spend less time and effort in it.
That was sort of the follow-up, is how do you decide which ones to do, and do we still have a lot of room to expand the number of reverse auctions that we do, or are we kind of on the bubble of where?
I think this year, we've done about 4 or 5, and we're anticipating hopefully we can get about 20. And sometimes with this, sometimes it becomes trial and error.
Yeah.
I think we did one, maybe for, I think it was athletic, like balls, and it's like 50, 60, 80 different items. And it just took too long. It was too labor intense, and it wasn't really worth the effort.
Great.
When you take big, items like this, or when you're doing one for like vehicles, I think we did a reverse auction for LAPD for their cars, and we saved close to $1 million on their project.
Yeah, it's a great innovation,
Yes.
and one that we need to continue on. And
Right.
I'd like to learn more, and as we move forward, of sort of the lens that we use for deciding where it makes sense
Right.
and where it doesn't. I have every confidence that you're doing it
Right.
the right way, but it's something that we could learn, and other departments too could potentially use, and that's we need to publicize
Yes.
the good work that we're doing on that as well. Something you said regarding the energy conservation, you mentioned $9 million worth of debt with DWP, but that we're paying it off.
It's paid off.
It's all paid off, so we don't have any outstanding.
Only debt we have, I think, with some other thing is the QEC bonds or whatever. And when we got the R money, we were able to leverage for that and get very, very low interest rates, I think less than 1%. So that should be paid off, I think, between 15 to 17 years. But there's sufficient savings in our energy to pay those back on time.
Okay, and that's, by the way, a great use of debt. I mean,
Right.
It's exactly, when you talk about the proper uses of debt, it's capital, it's, things that are going to save you money over the long run.
Right.
It's water conservation, energy conservation. Those things are great. In all the energy stuff, are you guys doing like Bloom boxes and some of those big things, or is it mostly the standard energy efficiency?
Just standard energy efficiency at this point, and we're working with different groups, like with the Los Angeles Better Building Challenge, and see if there's other areas that we can address or look at, whatever. But we have a very, very close relationship with them in looking at different areas. Right now, we're trying to focus on our big tickets like air conditioning, heating, water, and different things that we really can get to. And it was like during this different time when the different federal funding was coming, it came at a perfect time when we were taking, major cuts in our budget for the 4 or 5 years, because if we didn't have the money, it was no way to complete the roofs. Like for instance, at the Central Library, they were having major leaks and whatever, and that money arrived at perfect timing because the roof was close to, over 20 years, and actually it was rock, 800 tons of rock. And we're able to put a cool roof there, which during hot days is able to keep the heat from the roof, reduce it between 40 to 60%. And probably about 50 to 60% of our roofs in the city of LA are cool roofs. Every time we replace most of our roofs that meet that qualifications, we replace with cool roofs.
And the savings that you get from that obviously inure to the benefit of the city as a whole, but
Right.
I don't know if there's any way to capture some of that benefit into some sort of a fund that could be used to do more and more retrofits.
Because I know we have, I think it was an ordinance or a motion concerning that of financing, where the savings will go back, and whatever we get in savings or in discounts or rebates, we take that money and reinvest back into other projects.
And then one other thought on the vehicle management system upgrade. Originally, I think we thought a vendor-hosted VMS would be the most beneficial to the city,
Right.
but that changed.
Change.
And just wanted to know the reasons for that and how we're adjusting.
I think the reason is because of some of the very sensitive and highly sensitive information as it relates to LAPD. And the challenge is to make sure that we have sufficient staff, or I think some areas that the contractor really wasn't prepared to do, where we're better off having it maintained by ITA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Oyster, for your top 10 report. I look forward to it every month. Just to piggyback a little bit on conservation and roof replacement, in terms of the Cool Roof program, does it have does it factor in heat island reduction, things like that, and not just that, but even in terms of repavement of Wilshire Boulevard?
Mm-hmm.
We're learning more and more about heat islands and the
Right.
effects and climate change, et cetera, affecting Los Angeles pretty directly, especially this winter,
Mm-hmm.
the winter with no winter. What could you speak to that in terms of just the general philosophy in terms of city buildings, rooftops, any project that General Services?
As it relates to the roofs, I was saying before that like over 50% of the roofs that we have are coal roofs, which now probably reduces the heat concerning like 40 to 60%. As for instance, if you take the roof at the Central Library, because if you take the Central Library, it is in the middle of downtown Los Angeles. And we had to be very, very careful what color roof that we put there, because it wouldn't disturb other tenants because of the reflection or whatever. And reducing the glare and reducing the cost of energy is going to help overall in everything as it relates to energy conservation, to the climate or whatever. A lot of that energy, whatever that would be used, won't be used because of the reduction that we don't need. For instance, if you take the cooling towers, it's going to save 800,000 gallons of water a year. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the water conservation measures that we've implemented in the other facilities, where in the middle of the drought, 52 million gallons of water.
I made note of that, and I'll do everything I can to help get the word out about that. I mean, the city is doing some really great things,
Right.
and I think that we don't often enough get the word out, so I think that's very commendable.
And also, like I said, we're working also with DWP to come out and assist us and look at our facilities and make recommendations. They have this program where you bring in these different consultants or whatever, and DWP will reimburse you for that money and look at facilities of which one is a good site for solar, which is good for this and whatever, and strategically look at what we have and implement as much as we have with the resources that we've had.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Royster, thank you so much for the presentation, for
Okay.
coming. We look forward to working with you on these, and I'm sure the top 10 list will change
Yes.
as we go along, but
Okay.
this was a great start
Okay.
for that partnership, and thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So next, we're going to move to item 2. Mr. Villanueva, would you please read item 2 for us?
Yes, sir. Item number 2 is a Municipal Facilities Committee report relative to the Channel 35 studio relocation project in the Merced Theater at El Pueblo to the adjacent Masonic Hall at 426 North Main Street, Los Angeles, California. We have one card on this item, sir.
Okay. Great. Why don't we start with the card, Mr. Rick Coca?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rick Coca, Councilmember Weezar's office, just here to speak in support of the item. We had a related motion that kind of kicked everything off, that is in Arts Parks, and initially we were thinking of bringing in an entity like LA Opera and create a space for them to be able to perform out of. And in discussing it further with ITA, city attorney, and the way the funding mechanism works to do the improvement project and El Pueblo department as well, we saw that really there's an opportunity here to activate a space that hasn't been activated in a major way, for hundreds of years, right? It's like the city's oldest theater space. And so ITA has been very open, and we commend them actually for working with us, working with El Pueblo. We think cost-wise, we really want to work to make sure there's, it's cost neutral or very little cost. For instance, if you, as a council office, you receive or, send out media inquiries to our local channel 35, and so maybe this can be a place where instead of having your press conference on City Hall steps, very important matters can be done there perhaps, and through sponsorship from the mayor's office and the different council offices. But it's a beautiful site. We think it's very doable. And really gives us an opportunity to activate it in a way that wasn't in the initial plan. They're going to activate the whole building, but the first floor entrance, which is the main entrance of any building, to be able to activate that again for the city of Los Angeles after all these years is really exciting to us. We want to be very supportive in how it moves forward, and also making sure that the cost effectiveness is really zeroed in on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We could have staff ITA come forward to talk about this item.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Mark Wolf with ITA. We're very excited about the opportunity to move Channel 35 into the space at El Pueblo. It'll be moving us into the 21st century in terms of the technology that we'll be utilizing on a daily basis with the operations of our government access channel. And in working in partnership with the Bureau of Engineering, El Pueblo, and other stakeholders, we will work to develop the space and implement it so that we can now utilize that space for Channel 35. And as was discussed by Mr. Coco, we would even have an additional benefit to be able to have a live audience studio on the first floor of the space, which would be able to be leveraged for filming content that could also be then aired on the channel. So I think it's a win-win, and we're excited to move the project forward.
Does staff want to make initial comments or no?
I'm just Mike Dundas from the City Attorney's Office. I'm just here if you have questions.
One in the actual report that was forwarded to you from the Municipal Facilities Committee, there was one factual change that we would ask to be considered to be modified. On page 5 of the report, where it identifies where staffing for the new performance space is discussed, it currently says that we would only need additional resource if the space was used more than 9 hours per day. And actually, we're currently staffed to be able to support our existing operations, so we don't have enough resource to manage or operate this space. But so I've offered some language to change to make it factually correct, indicating that up to 6 staff would be required to operate and manage the studio space. If the hours of operations exceeded 9 hours, additional staffing could be required. So in looking at that, though, I wanted to say as a caveat, though, we're going to be working over the next several months with the key stakeholders of the project, and I think there's maybe some creative ways of staffing that space. We've talked about full cost recovery, so that for organizations that want to utilize that space, we can have some fee that would cover the staffing costs for managing the operations. We also, it doesn't necessarily have to be city staff that manage the space, because Channel 35 already has an operating model where we have a core team of staff that manage the operations of the channel, and we leverage existing contracts with contractors that supplement our staff in areas like cameramen, doing makeup artisans, etc. So that would be probably another way that we could staff the operation of that and utilize, as I said, some sort of fee-based system that would provide us full cost recovery for those services.
Yeah, I definitely would be interested in learning more about how that would work, because I have concerns about approving a project that's then basically locks us into additional staffing, at a time when we don't have, we're cutting staff, and I'm trying to increase staff for ITA for things that we've already prioritized, and to put in an additional burden of saying we need 6 additional staff to make this worthwhile. Otherwise, we build this project and it just sits there in mothballs if there's nobody to use it, and that's kind of an embarrassment for the city. So I'm worried about that in terms of how that would go, and I'm interested in the creative ideas, and may even think that we'll talk more about it, but maybe continue until we come back with those creative ideas. But the other aspect, and I'm not sure, there's sort of 2 pieces to this, right? There's the studio, which sort of makes a lot of sense, and then there's the theater, which seems great, but costs a lot of money. What's the price breakdown in terms of the studio versus the theater? The original scope project plus the creative, huge project.
I would ask the project manager from Bureau of Engineering to come to the table to address that question. I have to say, Councilman, I was initially myself concerned about additional costs for operation of we're calling it live audience studio space. I feel confident that we can come up with a solution that would be cost effective and would not be a large burden on the general fund to be able to address this through use of fees for use of the space, as well as utilizing, as I said, contractors to assist to augment our core team to be able to operate that space. But that's something that I think that, over the next several months we'll come back with more information on that. Our department is definitely anxious to get the project rolling. Bureau of Engineering can give an update, but we've gone through a selection process and have the architect engineering firm selected, and we'd like to get their process working, because it's about a 12-month process for the work that they'll do, and then the project will go out to bid for the actual construction. So we're still, multiple years out for the actual opening of the facility, and I think we have a lot of opportunity over the next few years here to really work out a system that be able to manage this operation in an effective manner.
Mahmoud Karimzadeh, Bureau of Engineering. Good afternoon. I concur with Mark's remarks that there are 2 things. One is we're going to design phase now. We are starting the design for this basically additional scope. There is no impact to design fee, so we basically absorbing that within the existing work, design work. But the construction amount is really not clear at this point. Like maybe in 2, 3, 4 months when we come back with the schematic design, then we know how much of additional cost we will have to bear with this additional scope. However, the space is small, it's very limited. It's not a big scope. In many ways, we have to spend the money for that space anyway, even if we don't have that public access. I don't believe the construction cost would be the amount that will probably make you to have a different decision on the space. However, at this point, we don't have any number for you. Maybe after the schematic design.
One thing to point out, Councilman, is there should be a distinction between the expenditure on the construction and, as Mark pointed out, the operational costs. The construction costs, regardless of how the final project scopes out in terms of price, are coming out of a special fund that can only be used for this type of construction for Channel 35. Whether the city decides to build a standard sort of small Channel 35 studio that they currently have now, or this larger live audience television studio, those funds couldn't necessarily be spent on anything else. But the question, as you asked and as Mark is talking about, is will there be an operational cost distinction that can't be paid out of these special funds?
Well, there's two parts. One is the operational question, which is very real. And then the other is the PEG funds. I mean, that's the money that we're talking about. As I understand it, we're talking about $23 million, something around that order.
19 to $23 million for the whole entire project, soft cost included.
Right. And my initial impression was that most of that was for the theater and not for the studio. But you're saying, you're flipping it around in terms of the way I understood it, saying that most of it is for the studio and not for... I guess let me put it out there as a question. Are we talking about spending all this money on a studio and then sort of as a little bit marginal cost and a benefit we get this theater, and that's great? Or are we talking about a studio cost and then we add in this huge chunk of money for this theater?
No, actually the other way around, Councilman. The live audience portion of the cost, construction cost, it would be much, much smaller amount compared to the rest of the project scope.
What portion?
Oh, we'll be talking about the studio. The building, this immersive theater has to go through retrofit. We have a structural work, seismic work that we have to do. We have a total upgrade of electrical system, mechanical system, plumbing system. Then we have architectural elements that we have to build out, a studio build out.
More, what's the portion of the original scope of the project,
Yes.
which was just the studio, and the expanded scope of the project, which is the studio and the theater? What's the delta between those two? In terms of
Well,
cost?
I can say probably the cost of the theater, so to the live audience theater, it wouldn't be more than 5 to 10% of the total construction cost that we have to do for Channel 35 relocation.
And although pictures would be helpful at this point, I can give you just kind of a basic rundown of the space. It's approximately, the primary space in Merced Theater is approximately 9,000 square feet. It's 3 floors. The first floor we're talking about using is this live audience theater. The second floor would be our normal Channel 35 studio space that will have our production control room, as well as 2 studio spaces for our fixed studio space use. And the third floor of the building will be where our staff offices are. So with that, just the first floor would be the part that's pertinent to this discussion in terms of additional costs, and I think that the figures that Mamoun has, the percentage that he's quoted, seems reasonable in terms of the cost of the space that's specific to the live audience theater.
Okay, so you only talk about between $1 and $2.3 million is the delta. And that's assuring, because I guess when I first looked at this, my concern on this was highest and best use for the PEG funds, and making sure that we're spending that money on its purpose, which is access to the city. And if we're spending all of that on a live theater, or a big chunk of that, I'm very skeptical that that's the highest and best use of our PEG funds. If it's sort of a bonus situation where we're able to spend a little bit more and it does have that ancillary benefit, then I'm more comfortable with it.
It is the latter, Councilman. It is the latter.
And if I could add too, there on page 4 of the report is a second table that provides information about the funding balance of the PEG fund, the 1% capital fund. It shows that by fiscal year 15-16, that even with the funding of this entire project, which is again estimated with a ceiling of approximately $23 million, the available balance will be approximately $12 million in the 1% account. And in addition to that, for years going forward, it's approximately $6 million a year that comes in of new money each year.
Although I'm already thinking of creative ways that we could spend that on better access for LA and broadening that concept, the Channel 35 concept throughout the area. So there's lots of good ways to spend that money. And I assume that there was some analysis, when this project was brought forward the first time, that there was some analysis of different projects that led to this project being selected. Obviously, I wasn't here during that process, so I'm not as aware.
Yeah, and probably the biggest driver that we had for moving the project forward was the need to upgrade our whole channel infrastructure from analog to digital, which was the driver for moving into a new location. And given that most both private sector and municipal television studios, when they do this type of an upgrade, they move to a new facility because it's too hard to run in parallel on operation while you're doing an upgrade. So that was really the driver for initially moving this project forward.
Yeah, no, and it's exciting. I mean, I'm excited about the project. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question, how many seats approximately will the live studio audience accommodate?
We really don't know at this point. Councilman, it's very small space. The first floor, very small space.
2,300 square feet?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the 2,300 square foot entirely wouldn't be the live audience theater because they still have to give access to the second floor where the Channel 35 will operate and the basement which some of the storage and other things are located. So really we're talking about a small space, so I can't say how many because there are columns.
But Chris Espinosa, General Manager of El Pueblo Historical Monument, I think we know that it has to be less than 100 seats because of union rules
Equity
and things like
waiver.
that.
99-seat theater
Correct.
type model. Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at the range of like 75 to 50 to 75 due to space constrictions as well, but we know for sure less than 100.
Right, for sure less than 100, but there are many columns there, so we have to really look creatively with other people who are going to use this space in order to put the seats where they can have some kind of view to the main stage. And it's not going to be a regular theater probably that you would think of that has a bigger stage and the audience is not like that. It will be more of the neighborhood.
A proscenium arch and Austrian curtains and the works?
Exactly.
Come on. No, just but that's exciting. I love the idea of a live studio audience. And when you report back on the costs of up to 6 additional city staff, might you consider partnering with an educational institution, a television and film school, and have a steady stream of interns and maybe even an accredited program operating in there to support this and look into the practicality of that? USC is very, very nearby. We have accredited schools in Hollywood on film and television and the technical side of things. And that might be a way forward to where we could actually mentor professionals entering into the field.
We'll definitely look into those different options.
Terrific. Thank you.
So what I suggest we do today is we'll continue at one time. We'll come back with a report on the way the operations ways that we can ensure that we're not putting something forward that has to go to Budget Committee and has to do all of that because otherwise we'd be obligated to send it to Budget Committee if we're putting in additional staff members as a requirement to this. And then that we can also go back and look at the issues that Mr. O'Farrell brought up and sort of and break down the numbers on a little bit more on the other part, the cost driver, which is the funds, the PEG funds, and how much is being used for the additional theater and that kind of thing. But it's an exciting project, and we won't hold it up very long. We'll just bring it back at the next meeting for those items.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Objection?
No objection.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we'll move to item 3. Villanueva, would you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, we're continuing item 3, I believe, right? Yeah. We're going to continue item 3, so let's skip that and move to item 4.
Yes, sir. Item number 4 is the General Services Department report relative to a request for a new lease for office space and parking for City Attorney and Police Department located at 100 Ocean Gate, Long Beach, California. We have no cards on this item.
Good afternoon, Chuck Rubin, Department of General Services. The Department of General Services is requesting approval of a new lease of office space at the Ocean Gate Legacy Tower for city attorneys and Los Angeles Police Department staff who represent the city in cases heard at the Long Beach Courthouse. The City Council had previously approved a lease within the courthouse itself, but the city and landlord could not overcome tenant improvement build-out issues. The Ocean Gate space now being requested is in a nearby building and provides for more space to house an approved, larger city attorney staff at a considerably cheaper cost. Since this item was approved by the Municipal Facilities Committee on January 30th, the city was able to negotiate a better early termination right. The new termination right enables the city to terminate at any time within the term of the lease with 6 months advance notice, instead of only after the first 5 years of the lease, in the event that the court moves the city's cases to another courthouse. If this right is exercised, the city agrees to reimburse the landlord for unamortized tenant improvement costs and leasing commission costs. I would like to request that if you approve this item, that it is as amended, changing this early termination language.
Right, I think we have the language in front of us, the suggested language.
Correct.
Great. Question on the spacing. I know that the new lease has a considerable amount of additional space.
Yes.
What's the need for the additional space?
Well, the space that we had inside the courthouse was limited to what was available, and it wasn't adequate for the staff that was going to be in there to begin with. But the city attorney understood, and LAPD, at the time that was it. That was all that was available. Since that time, the city attorney got additional staffing for the Long Beach location, and so the space in the courthouse itself was not going to be sufficient. The cost of the new location is much less than the inside the courthouse, and it afforded us the ability to give the city attorney and PD adequate space at a very reasonable rental rate.
Which sounds great. I just wanted to just get the assurances that we're aligned in terms of our, because you can always save more money by reducing the space, but I don't want to even suggest that if the spacing is the appropriate amount of spacing for the need. And I just want to hear that, because it's a big difference, but I just want to hear that is the appropriate spacing that you need.
I would let Mr. Mangan.
Yes, sir. I'm Bill Mangan. I'm with the City Attorney's Office. I'm Administrative Coordinator. We really are fortunate that the Long Beach Courthouse deal didn't come to fruition, because it was going to be in 2 separate locations within the courthouse. It was going to bifurcate our staff. We would have been separated from the police officers who we have to partner with at the office, and also our hearing officer function would have been in another office and a less secure place where the public would be coming in. And so, as Mr. Rubin said, it was kind of a take it or leave it deal. It was the last available space in the building. We tried 6 different ways to try to configure how we could put our staff in there comfortably and to be able to operate effectively, and it was just going not work well. And as it turned out, because of negotiations between the leasing agent and the GSD, it fell through, and this other space became available, and it was really a windfall for us. It's a lot nicer place. It's cheaper. It's more economical. We can put everybody there. Very little modifications required. We can move in probably within 2 weeks, and it's a great deal for us.
They did have other spaces available in the Ocean Gate property, so we looked at the best one that fit the staff that city attorney and PD had. And this is it.
Thank you. How about years beyond 2, 3 to 10? Any,
There's a standard lease cost increase. I think it's 3%. Yes, there's a 3% increase. It should be noted the landlord is giving us year one at 50% of the normal rental rate. So they're giving us a nice break there, which you could translate across the entire 10 years. But basically, years 2 through 10 are at 3%.
which is on parity with whether it had been the Long Beach courthouse? So there's no,
Correct.
yeah, there's no downside
No,
in years beyond 2. Okay,
correct.
thank you.
And then last question about the parking, if it's changed from, parking to reserved, is that going to add cost?
Well, typically, we get parking that is unreserved. And then if the department feels that there is some justification, we ask them to fund that.
Well, great. Without any additional questions, what I'm going to recommend is that we approve the GSD request as amended by the amendment that you've submitted, which is a good early termination thing.
Thank you.
So
No objections.
Without objection, that is so ordered.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, the amendment is to strike out the language that refers to the after 5 years and to add the language that reads, if early termination is exercised, city will reimburse landlord for an amortized tenant improvement cost and leasing commission. Thank you,
And
sir.
we'd also request that this goes forthwith, please.
Okay? Send it forthwith.
Thank you.
I haven't yet been determined that gets us much more than a couple of hours, but sure.
Thank you very much.
Great. So now we'll move to items 5 through 10, which are the obsolete records
Yes.
item. And we do have cards on those items, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So we have, on items 5 through 10, we have a card on each item from Antonia Ramirez. So,
Would you like me to
Come.
read it to the record, sir?
what's that?
Read it to the record.
Could, yes, please read it into the record.
Yes, sir. Items 5 through 10
Thank you.
are city attorney reports relative to the request to destroy obsolete records from the Los Angeles Police Commission for the Los Angeles Police Department's various division from periods ranging from January 1965 to December 2008.
Thank you very much.
And if you would, please keep your comments to the issue at hand, which is the
I'm
obsolete
aware of that.
records.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before we destroy the so-called obsolete records from the LA Police Commission for the LAPD Wilshire Division that comprises 150 boxes for the periods of January 1st, 1981 through December 31st, 2000, we must first take into account that a lot of work went into these records. Now, whether these were accurate and objectively done or falsified, that is for the city attorney to decide. For ladies and gentlemen, we have a massive budget deficit, and we have a Latino gangbanging epidemic, and we have dirty, rogue, corrupted cops in every station. Therefore, what we need to do is review the work of all the cops, detectives, and investigators in each police report and cross-reference them with each criminal. For back then in 1981, we didn't have daily home invasion robberies or massive gang epidemics or any domestic terrorists and junkies and gangbangers. And thus, we can safely deduce which are unethical, corrupted, dirty, rogue cops, and fire them, sanction them, and arrest them, and with no pension benefits. Then we can check the progress or the downturn of the criminals and their rap sheets. Therefore, let's dissect these records, because a magic bullet lies hidden in all these so-called obsolete records, and ultimately will cure our society's ills and will improve the city of Los Angeles' quality of life for all our residents. Okay, thank you very much. And the next one, if you're ready.
Great, we can take them all together. You can,
Oh, okay.
We've got,
Oh, I see, okay.
Go ahead.
I thought you were going to give me the time for,
you've got the time, go ahead.
okay.
It's all the same item, obsolete record.
Excuse me, one moment, please. Okay, okay, that was number 5. Number 6, I object, and many taxpayers object, that you destroy the so-called obsolete records from the LA Police Commission for the LAPD Southwest Division records that comprises of 6 boxes for the period of January 1st, 2007 through December 31st, 2008. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we have an almanac, if you will, of maybe ethical hard work or falsified reports by great men and women of the badge or corrupted dirty road cops behind the twisted badge. And we can monitor the progress of these criminal deviants from the time period, and we can spot where we as a community and law enforcement went wrong and where there may be some improvements, because the reality is we are in financial troubles and we have a massive Latino gangbanging epidemic, and we have several dirty cops as well as good cops that we need to fire, arrest, and sanction, and ultimately remove them and their pensions. We must conduct all our city of LA business, including law enforcement, with ethical high standards and with full integrity of the badge. The answers lie in those obsolete records. Thank you. Number 7, this is a matter of principle. I object that we destroy these so-called obsolete records for the LAPD Devonshire Division, records comprising of 85 boxes for the period of January the 1st, 1982 through December 31st, 2004. Ladies and gentlemen, we may have very valuable information that can either break or make Los Angeles. We need that tangible wealth of information, if in fact is there. For I believe that there are some great cops like our wonderful chopper pilots, but nevertheless, these crucial records have the answers to many of our city's high crime rates, which Charlie Beck is keeping hush-hush. We need to be transparent and with the utmost full disclosure to our city taxpayers and constituents. Your public service will be rewarded if you indeed dissect all these voluminous materials and help reduce the high crime rates, including deport or imprison these repeat gangbangers and offenders, and fire, arrest, or sanction all lazy, corrupted, and unethical dirty cops. And by doing this, we will improve law enforcement morale and the image, reduce the high crime rate, and have a city of financial surplus. Thank you. Number 8, I object the destruction of these so-called records for the Los Angeles Police Commercial Crime Rates Division records, comprising of 339 boxes from the period of January 1st, 1965 through December 31st, 2004. Now here you have a wonderful wealth of information where these records went as far back as January 1st, 1965. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, the gangbangers today can pick any lock open, and so all Home Depot locks are worthless and ineffective today. Today, commercial businesses get hit by vandals on a daily basis. I'm curious, what was the crime rate in 1965, and did these business merchants have to deal with these diabolical Latino gangbangers? Probably not, but the locks were very secure back then. So, ladies and gentlemen, where did we go wrong? Who failed us? Was it the city or was it law enforcement? We went wrong somewhere. The answers lie in those records, and it takes a creative genius with an inquisitive mind and one who believes in the rule of law. It also requires a person who is a muckraker and hates what LA and America has become. So I tell you, the answers are there. If we look hard enough, we will reveal, or it will be revealed to us. Let us not give up on this beautiful city. Let us restore America. And number 9, thank you. I object that we destroy these so-called records for the LAPD Operations Valley Bureau, which comprises 7 boxes for the period of January 1st, 2005 through December 31st, 2006. Do not destroy these records. Share these records with all LAPD departments. Create a flow chart of all criminals, then create a flow chart of all police officers and detectives that wrote on these records, and conclude with its failures or progress for today in the 21st century. The answers are there, hidden away for us to find and ultimately mend the city of Los Angeles and restore the safety and protection of its constituents, including myself. Thank you. And number 10, I object to destroy these so-called LAPD Central Division records, which comprises of 450 boxes for the period of January 1st, 1972 through December 31st, 2003. I admonish you not to destroy these records without double-checking them one more time. You will find not only glitches, flaws, but the answers to many of our burdening high crime rates and how we may streamline the criminals in a more compartmentalized mode and secure the city of Los Angeles. And again, we will increase our financial situation and we will be rewarded. So again, the answers are there. You heard it here first. So I graciously thank all of you.
Thank you so much for coming to the committee and for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So without objection, that item is approved. And Mr. Villanueva, does that conclude all the items on the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this meeting is adjourned.